What's up, guys? It's Jake from Quad Hunting, and welcome back to another Quadcast. It's been a hot minute, but if you're watching on the video version of the podcast, welcome to my new office. It's a mess. There's boxes and stuff everywhere. The closet is so disorganized, but that'll change in the next couple weeks, hopefully, as I now have a savings account back, and I can start actually getting stuff to organize this all out nicer. So, this podcast is going to be an interesting one. I have recorded this podcast 3 times, or 4 now. I've lost track, and I've deleted it every time. It is one that I know at this point is just going to get taken the wrong way. People are going to hear it, and they're going to assume I don't like them, or they made it so I didn't like this, but it's not necessarily the case for most people. Most people that I worked with were great, but this is just why I didn't like working in news. Yeah. So let's get into it. About a year and a half ago now at this point, I started my job at a local news station down in Florida. How does somebody from Michigan who grew up in Michigan their entire life end up at a news station down in Florida? Well, it's getting to the point. I knew my student loans were coming due, and I had a job at the time that I was not making much money, but I absolutely loved. I loved that job so much. I still work there, so I shouldn't say I loved that job. I got into working for a local PBS station here in West Michigan, and we got to cover all of Grand Valley's varsity sports events. Softball, baseball, basketball for men and women, our soccer team, football, tennis, track and field, cross country, swimming and diving. Like if Grand Valley had the sport, I covered it. And I loved it. There was a lot of travel, whether it was going to Denver or Indianapolis, Cleveland, Birmingham, Alabama. I already said Denver, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That was a real fun trip. I'm going to have a podcast where I talk a lot about those trips. But I knew student loans were coming due, and I did not make enough money to pay for my student loans. I was making around $9 an hour, and when you think that's not much at all. And when you have between 20 and 30 grand in student loan debt, that really is not much. And that was no way I was going to be able to live by myself, and then pay all my bills on top of that. So one of my friends, Savannah, one of my dear friends, we went to school together. Shortly after she graduated, she went right down to Florida. She had a connection through one of our professors, and they hired her right away. And right after she got hired, she told me, apply, move down here to Florida, and work with me. And I said, there's no way in hell I am moving to Florida to work in news. That was 2 things I really didn't like, Florida and news. And so I said no. And then fast forward 3 months, and now my first student loan bill is coming really close. And I still am only making $9 an hour. So as much as I loved the job, I knew something had to change. And Savannah reached out to me again and said, we're hiring photogs and producers. You should apply. And I sat there and I was like, you know what? The worst thing they can say is no. The second worst thing they can say is yes. I went into it very pessimistically, as you can tell. So I applied, gave them my resume, sent in the application, and within 12 hours of applying, I had a phone interview lined up with a recruiter. So I had done a bunch of interviews and stuff. I was like, whatever. They're just wanting to get this out of the way. Interviewed with the recruiter the very next day, and he was, this is great. Sound good. I like your resume. I'm going to pass you along to the station's news director. And I went, okay. Still not thinking much of it. I've heard your resume's great and all that, and then never hear back from anyone again. And the very next day, I had the interview with the news director. And so now I'm starting to think I could potentially be getting this job. I might have to move to Florida. And the very, very next day, I had a interview with the assistant news director, who at the time was overseeing the newscast directors. Because during the interview with the news director, she had said, I know you applied for photog and I know you applied for producer, but we also have this director position open. Would that be something you're interested in? That's something we need to fill soon. And I said, I really don't care what I do in the newsroom, that was the truth. Because I never had the drive or want to work on local news. So I was like, I'll just do anything. I really don't care. And so I interviewed with the assistant news director the next day, who was in charge of the newscast directors. And she just kind of gave me the layout. And one thing that they mentioned was, hey, we do this weekly football show with Florida State because we're right near it. And we're going to do you can help cover high school football. And so I was like, okay, I can still do some sports, which is what I really wanted to get into. I looked at this job as this is going to be a stepping stone to getting the real job I want, which is being somebody who works on the sideline, either holding a camera or being the director of the game, being the one who called out camera 1, you go to camera 2 to take this guy, camera 3, zoom in. I wanted to do that. That's really what I wanted to do. That's the kind of directing I want to do. So I was like, you know what? If I can get some experience just as a director, I think that would be great. So I'll do it. And day number 4 rolled around since I had applied, and I had a job offer. And they right away were like, hey, you gonna accept it? And I was like, I have to talk to people. It's kind of a big deal moving 1,000 miles. Now I got to look for an apartment. I got a lot of things I'd have to do, so I'm not going to just accept a job right off the bat. So I told them, give me a day or so. I talked to my family, and they, of course, were excited, nervous, just like I was. But in the end, I ended up making the decision to go. And I don't regret it. As much as I say I didn't like working in news, as much as I say that it's not something I would do again, I don't regret it. So now the whole process began. Finding an apartment, packing everything up, packing everything that I had ever had in my life up, and moving. So I had trouble instantly with an apartment. Nobody would rent to me without me, doing a tour of the apartment. Well, it's kind of hard to tour an apartment when you're 1,000 miles away, and this is pre-COVID when everything had to be done in person. I couldn't have had somebody walk me through an apartment, through Zoom or something like that. That they just didn't do that back then, at least is my experience. So I finally I was like, you know what? Luckily Savannah lives down there. I'm going to head down there like a week earlier than my start date and just stay with Savannah, which gives me time to get familiar with everything down there, and 2, try to find an apartment. So I moved down there, packed up as much as I could fit in my car, my little Ford Focus, and started the drive. I started the drive on my 25th birthday and got in a car accident. That was fun. Hydroplaned into a guardrail, which, great way to spend a move. And it took me 27 hours to do the drive by myself. So when I do a travel by myself, I'm not huge on gotta go. I take my time, especially something like that. I'm like, I'm not on a schedule. I'm not in a rush. I'm not going to freak out and go too hard and drive myself too hard. So it took me a while to get down there, especially after I got in the car accident, and I then spent time in Walmart getting new tires so I wouldn't hydroplane again. Middle of Kentucky somewhere. I don't even know where it was, but I finally got down there. And the next day went and looked at apartments, and I had set 4 apartment showings up on the way down and the drive down. And by the time I was supposed to go to them, 3 of them canceled. So I only had 1. So I finally, like, as soon as I toured it, I knew before I walked in, like, I need this apartment. So I just basically told them, I'll take it. Did the paperwork, got it. And there's issues with that apartment. I still have issues with that apartment complex. They're basically just withholding my security deposit because they think they're stupid, or they think I'm stupid, but they're stupid. I'm still fighting them on that 6 months after I've moved out. Anyways, fun times. We get the apartment. My parents come down that weekend. We unpack everything. We get everything settled by that Sunday. So it was like 2 days. We had everything. My entire life was unpacked. Everything was set up in my apartment, and then I had to go to work that next day. And when I walked in, I don't know what my expectation was, but I was let down instantly. I've gone through some other newsrooms, and they all look like very fancy, high tech, bustling, people around everywhere. That was not what I walked into at the news station. Everything looked old, and there was hardly anyone there. Like, I walked in at 9. Like, this is, people should be, there should be a lot of stuff going on. Like, 9 o'clock in a newsroom, like, it should be bustling. People should be, like, cranking out stories was what I walked in thinking. Local news, that's no. Especially in a very small city like we were in, no. So go in and I meet everyone, and I love telling the story to the people that it affected. I walked in and immediately started judging people just based on how they looked and what I thought they were. One of the sweetest, kindest people I ever met in my life, I thought was, I like, just my first thought when I saw her, I'm like, oh, she's totally stuck up. She's probably one of those preppy, stereotypically, like what is stereotypically considered to be a cheerleader, but the bad way, most are kind of nice and cool, but the stereotypical bad version of the cheerleader is what I thought she was. And I just kind of looked at everyone. I'm like, wow, you guys I feel like you guys think you're stuck up, and you think you're and I think you're full of yourselves, and you think you're the best. That wasn't the case. Everyone I worked with for the most part was great. But so I just love telling all of them what my first impression was just by just sitting there and listening to them in that first meeting. And well, I only told the people I'm actually friends with because some people probably wouldn't want to hear what my first impression was. So we and then I got into training, and the really bad part about being a director, it doesn't matter how much somebody, especially for me, it doesn't matter how many times somebody tells me this is what you need to do. I need to be hands-on. I need to be doing it while somebody's explaining it, and that way it sticks in my head better. The only way that happens is when you direct a live newscast. So you're gonna make mistakes. And because I walked in to a really short-staffed situation, I got thrown right in. My second week there, I was directing shows, which when I started training, I never would let that happen. Even though we were short staffed and I was working a shift I didn't want to work because we were short staffed, and I was training someone to take my spot, I wouldn't let him take my spot until I felt like, yes, he's fine. He can handle this. So my training was not that way. It didn't matter if my trainer thought I was ready or not. I was getting thrown in. And I got all 3 evening shows plus the 11 o'clock show, which the first 3 shows, all a half hour, and they're back to back to back. So local news, a lot of people have misconceptions about local news. Number one, there's no money in local news. There's none. If you're going into news because you think you're going to make money, run away. You're never going to make money. Unless you get top 10, top 15 market, you're not going to make the kind of money you assume you're going to make in news. There just isn't money in it. So, which is one of the reasons why I left. More on that later. So we, I'm getting into this, and I have to, another misconception is you don't just walk in and it's like, oh, everything's ready. Let's go. We're going to do all this. when you're a director in live news, especially at the station I was at, I was the director, the technical director, the audio engineer, the camera operator. You do, I don't want to say everything. You were the graphics person. It was not like what I thought a director was. A director in my head, and a director that covers live sports, is somebody who, you have camera operators who are all running cameras. You have an audio engineer. You have a switcher or a technical director. You have everything else is managed by somebody else, and you're just the person who's in the lead. You're in charge of everything. And you call out ready camera one, take camera one, bring the audio up a little bit, put this graphic up, take that graphic out, change to this camera. You're the one making all the moves like that. You're telling people, like, do everything I'm saying, and then we'll make it look great. That's not local news at all, especially at the station I worked at. I had to do all of that. I had to manage what really is like 4 people's jobs as one person. And that's just local news. Things are now set up that way, so that's how it goes. And when you start, it's very overwhelming because you have to, you're not really directing the show. You're programming the show. You go in and you tell, I want this camera looking here at this point. This camera needs to be over here. This anchor's mic comes up. This anchor mic comes down. This reporter comes in. Their mic comes up. The anchor mic drops out again. Play this video here. Play that video there. Play this soundbite. That's what you're doing. It's a lot more pre-prep, and you're doing a lot of work before the newscast. And during the newscast, if you did your work before, you don't have to do much work during the newscast except to advance to the next thing. Definitely didn't like that. Wasn't something I enjoyed. The hard part was I started getting good at it. And it's a weird situation being good at something you don't like doing, because you like that you're good at it, but you don't like doing it. So, and the hard part for me was, and always is, I really cannot sit by and let things happen. Case in point, when we finally got staffed and we had 2 directors for the evening, I couldn't just sit there for the longest time and while the other director was going and not trying to fix things. It got really annoying for some other directors, but a couple of them really needed it because they were not good at their job. Burn some bridges here. So I felt like because the problem was I became friends with the reporters and the producers, and I wanted, even though I wasn't passionate about what I was doing, I was passionate about what they were doing because I knew they were passionate about what they were doing. So whatever I could do to try to make their job better and their job easier is what I wanted to do. I needed to do it. It wasn't I wanted to do it. I needed to do it because I'd feel bad if I or another director made a mistake that made that producer's show or that reporter's hit worse. So I really, Kylie always, one of the producers, always would say, you do such a great job of keeping everyone calm. Thank you for keeping me calm. Thank you for not freaking out and stressing out. And that's when I learned, like, I have a resting bitch face or I would just joke because that's what I do when I'm stressed out. Like, I try not to show it on the outside. So I would be stressing out, freaking out. In my head, I am just going 100 miles an hour, but on the outside, everyone's like, he's doing great. He's calm. And it's helping them stay calm. And so then especially when I started hearing you're like, you being calm is like really helping everything, I felt then I was obligated to stay calm and not freak out, because if I freaked out, then everything would get bad. As the director, you were the last line of defense. if there was a bad graphic, a bad video, if a reporter's shot wasn't clean because the area of Florida we were in was hell with technology. If you got outside of the city, nothing worked. Cell phones, the live views, our TVUs, I think they were TVUs. Yeah, they were garbage. Things didn't work. And you just had to be prepared, like, oh, it's not going to work, so we're just going to skip, and go. And so if somebody else kind of missed something, as a director, you had the ability to skip and to kind of hide the fact that something didn't go right. But if you, as the director, make a mistake and have the wrong camera programmed, it's very obvious when the anchor is staring over here and they're trying to tell the story, but the camera's coming from this angle, and then they have to snap their head over because either they see themselves in their monitor or you tell them in their ear, wrong camera, one, or something like that, and they have to then now, very obviously on camera, move. So it was just, or the wrong video would play at the wrong time, or the audio wouldn't be right. And as you, a director, if you're not quick on that, it's just going to be so obvious to the viewers. And I stressed about that every damn day. And it just got to the point where I don't handle stress very well. When I do get stressed out, I am a stress eater. I eat everything in sight, and there's a reason. That is the reason why I gained a bunch of weight when I lived in Florida. I gained over 50 pounds living in Florida, and that was within 6, maybe 7 months, because I had a wellness check, and they were like, "We're kind of worried about you." While I was working down there, it was just like I was going home mad because something would go wrong, or I would mess up, and I have the hardest time turning work brain off and just going into home brain, and just something bad happens at work, just leave it at work. I have the hardest time doing that. I can't. I get home and I'm still mad, and I'm like, well, if I'd done this different, or if this person would have done that, or it'd been fine. So that always bugged me and bothered me, and I would just come home angry, and I would stress eat, or I couldn't fall asleep. It was not good for my health. Working in news was not good for my health. And I try to tell people, if you love working in news, do it. Just because I had a bad situation, I wasn't built to work in local news. It's a very stressful, very high-paced, very frantic environment that I don't like being in. So, nose is itching. Ugh. So, I get into, finally, things are starting to go okay. I'm getting into work. I'm seeing my friends all the time, which I loved. I would go back and forth with the reporters. It was just fun. It was starting to get fun because I was really enjoying the people I was working with. And then COVID hit. And when you're working a job where you don't like your job, and it stresses you out, and you're not making money, and you just don't love it. It's not something you look forward to. You start to hate waking up every morning to go into work. You start hating the building. You start hating the drive. And that's where I was already kind of at. I even hated the city because I didn't like, I shouldn't say hate. I didn't like the city because I didn't like the job. And that's what I associated the city to, was the job and not the city. It wasn't until shortly before I moved back to Michigan where I was like, the city actually was pretty nice. And it was just because I had put so much on. It was actually the day before I moved, because I took my parents out and we just walked around and going to dinner, and I was like, really wish I would have appreciated the city more when I was living here. So the few things I liked about my job were the people that I was around. And we'd just joke around, we'd laugh, even if mistakes were made, we'd still, kind of laugh about it. We'd eventually get to the point about laughing about mistakes like that, but we would have fun sitting in the booth, especially with some of the producers. You could really get them going, and we would just all be laughing while we're doing a newscast, and it was fun. I've said fun so many times in this last 3 minutes, but COVID hit, and it went from 20 to 30 people in the news station every day down to about 6, 7, maybe 8. And it was directors, engineers, and a couple management people. That was all that was allowed in the station. And because it hit so fast, and it went from 0 to 100 with all of the lockdowns and the restrictions, and we were not prepared at all for this to happen. Obviously, hardly anybody was, but in local news, and it felt like our station in particular, because I was talking to friends who their stations were already like, nope, you're working from home. Here's everything you need. Go. It felt like for us, we were behind on that because we didn't have the equipment we needed, so we couldn't do it. And it was very much, as much as I know for everyone it was, in news stations especially, it was very touch and go, and it was very trial by fire. You were going to learn by making the mistakes, especially with anchors at home and people not coming into the station. So now you took the one thing that I really, really loved about the job, the people I worked with, and now I don't see them at all. We can't meet up outside of work because of all the restrictions. We're not seeing each other at work because of, obviously, the restrictions. And it got really depressing, being one of the only people in the building every day. So we would have, and on top of that, my job got harder. It went from something that, I would stress about, but it got to that, by that point, the stress wasn't so bad. I wasn't freaking out. But it got to the point where the last 3-4 months I worked there these are the only anxiety attacks I've ever had in my life, but I was having anxiety attacks once, maybe twice a week, and I had never had them before that. So it really freaked me out the first time I had one, because now the producers aren't in the booth with you. The producers are at their house watching a delayed stream of the newscast. So they're not seeing things as they happen. You're having now to be the one, instead of being as the director, being able to focus on what are the audio levels at, what's coming up next, how are my reporters looking. And a lot of times even the producers would focus more on the reporters, and all you had to do was talk to the anchors, focus on your audio, and see what's coming up next. To now, you had to try to focus on everything. And when you're focusing on that many things, you're not focused on anything. And you're not giving anything the proper time and focus it needs. So I started really, that's when all the panic attacks and the anxiety attacks started happening, because there was nothing I could do. I felt like there was nothing I could do because our anchors' shots at home would go out, they would fail, and then you'd have to recode the entire show as the show's happening to just be the anchor in the studio. And it got to the point where I just told people, I'm like, why can't we just do the one anchor in the studio? Why do we need to have an anchor at home? Why do we need that in the show? It makes the show worse. And they didn't agree. I still think that would have been the best way. One anchor shows are not bad, especially when it ends up being clean and not a mess because the anchor shot decided to freeze in the middle of them reading their script. There was just a lot of issues that went along with it that people didn't foresee until they happened. And the only way they could happen was when it was happening during a live newscast. So then now I really got to the point where I was like hating everything about everything. Hated the apartment, hated the city, hated the job, hated the drive. Really started hating people I was seeing every day at work, because the ones I was seeing weren't the ones that I really became friends with, or the majority of the people I was seeing were not the ones I was the friends with. Hardly any of my friends were able to come into the building anymore. And then it just boiled over. I finally took a week off of work, which I'd only taken maybe 1 day here, 2 days here, to fly home for a weekend or something like that. But I finally was like, you know what? I had gotten to the point, I had told my mom, I was like, it was early June, and I'm like, I'm taking some time off like this Friday and this Monday, and I'm going to come home. And she said, how about you wait and you come home for the 4th of July? We're going to go camping for a week. We've already got everything all set up. So if you want to come with us, come visit us then. And so I said, oh yeah, you know what? I got the time. I'm going to take this entire week off, and I'm going to go home and celebrate the 4th of July. And so I did, which is when the ball really started rolling on me quitting my job. I had only ever committed to working there for a year, but because COVID was going on, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to get a job in sports right now because all sports are canceled. I need to stay here. So I had, decided I wasn't going to re-sign my lease at the apartment I had. I was going to find a new apartment. So I started that process. And so I finally get home, and I'm hanging out with my family and some family friends. We're all sitting around a campfire, and it's fun. We're going tubing, hanging out on the beach, and it was fun. It was just like, I had missed family and all that, but I had also missed all the stuff we used to do, like go camping, go on the boat, doing all this stuff. Going home made me realize I really miss all of this so much. So I decided, while we were there, the last night we were camping, 2 days before I had to fly home, it was like 1, 2 a.m. I'm sitting around a campfire with like 3 other people left at this point. And like, I'm not even talking. I'm just sitting on one side of the fire pretty much by myself, just like looking into the fire. And I started to feel kind of depressed. Like, who knows the next time I'm going to be able to do this? I'm going to have to go home, back to Florida, and I don't get to do this kind of stuff. And I just really started feeling real sorry for myself. And next day, as we were going back to my parents' house from the campground, I was on my phone and just looking at jobs. And my mom noticed and was like, looking to move home. And I made the comment, or I asked the question, how long can I live with you guys without having a job? Because here's how I was looking at it. My lease was ending at the end of that month. My new lease, I could still get out of because I hadn't signed it. They had given me all the paperwork. I had paid a security deposit, but I hadn't signed the lease yet. And so I'm like, this lease is ending at the end of the month. My new lease hasn't started yet. I haven't used enough vacation time to where I'd have to pay work back. And I'd get home in plenty of time to give them like a 2-3 week notice. Get back to Florida, and then would give my parents time and to get everything set up to where they can come down and help me move. And everything just seemed to be lining up. So I had asked that, and Mom real quickly was like, as long as you need to. And Dad's always been the more practical one with that kind of stuff. And it was, you don't quit a job unless you have a job lined up. But again, I was looking at it. My new lease, if I signed that, it was going to cost me 2 months rent to get out of the lease early. And I was like, but if I just come home now, I don't have to worry about, because I knew I was going to start looking for jobs no matter what. And I knew, but my issue was if I got a job after I had signed the new lease, it was going to cost me a lot more money to move home. And it was versus if I just moved home now. So, by the end, before I got on the plane, it was set in my head. My dad finally was like, if you need to, we're going to help you. You can definitely stay here as long as you need to. You can move home. We support that decision. And I had told everyone I'm moving home. And they all were convinced by the time I'd get back to Florida, I would find something I liked about it and I would change my mind. But I am stubborn. I am hard-headed. And consequences be damned. Once I make a decision, I'm sticking to the decision. So I got back to work that following Monday, and I just had a better outlook. Everything, like, there was nothing that could go wrong to like bring me down from where I was, because I knew there's a light at the end of the tunnel, a light that I didn't know existed, a light that I didn't think I was going to see for a long time. And I remember I called my boss on a Zoom call, or I called him on the phone, because typically we had Zoom meetings. He had opened up a Zoom window where if we needed to talk to him about anything going on at work, we could do it. And every day it was like an hour long. So I was sitting there and he never showed up. So I called him and he was like, oh yeah, we just haven't done one in a while. So I figured I could work on something else during that time. So, and he goes on and he asks me about my whole vacation, how it was seeing my family and all that. And I'm like, oh, it was great. Trying to figure out like how I'm going to say, oh, by the way, I'm quitting. Because I kind of did feel a little trepidation about quitting, only because I knew we were already short-staffed. We never got up to full capacity while I worked there. We were always short-staffed. So I knew that was only going to get worse with me quitting. And for a couple of people I worked with, one of the other directors who also was working as a producer, and I know she wanted to be a producer, they were trying to focus her into being a producer. I was worried that it was going to really affect her and she would be stuck directing, because I knew she didn't like directing. And I was worried about that. And so I had a little trepidation about that. But at the end of the day, I had to just realize, like, I can't make decisions I can't keep basing my decisions off other people. This is a situation I don't like being in, an environment I don't like, and ultimately a job I didn't like. So I'm like, I can't worry about how that's going to affect other people when it's negatively affecting me right now. And I know it sounds selfish, but it's not bad being selfish all the time. You have to be selfish sometimes. And for me, I was like, you know what? It's my time to be selfish right now. Especially after one day, like I had a total breakdown before I had gone home. And like I'm in the car, I am crying on the way home. Not because I'm sad, because that's just one of the things I do when I hit a certain level of angry. I just started cry driving, and I was yelling. I was just nobody else in the car with me, no one on the phone with me. Like I'm just yelling into the space. And I texted my mom and I said, how did you and dad work so many jobs that you hated? And why did you keep doing it? Like, because I know my parents have had jobs they didn't like. And I'm like, how did they do it? And my mom responded back with, well, we had kids. We had bills. We had this. And like, we had to do all this stuff because of you guys. Like, we know we couldn't just, if we hated a job, we couldn't leave it because we had children to support. And I took it as, well, damn, I don't have any kids. Who do I have to support? There's nobody. And so when you're a single person with no kids, your priorities are different. You can be selfish. You can focus on yourself. So that's kind of what I took out of that whole conversation with my mom. Probably not the right message, but so I'm on the phone with my boss, and he's trying to wrap up the conversation, and he goes, all right, I'll talk to you later, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, it still hadn't told him. So I finally was like, oh, before you go, I need to put in my notice. I'm going to move back to Michigan. And I know, like, I didn't say it in a good, like, I kind of blurted it out. And he was like, oh, okay, well, I'll talk to you later. I was like, oh, he didn't take it well. But as soon as, like, I got off the phone, like, all the weight was off my shoulders. I had a totally, like I said, totally different outlook. I felt great. And there was nothing that could happen in the next 3 weeks. Nothing happened in the next 3 weeks. Things went wrong, but I couldn't care anymore. Like, I was like, I'm moving home. I'm going to be, like, close to my family, close to friends. I'm going to be back someplace where I feel, I don't want to say feel good, but where I feel wanted. So it got, so I, did my exit interview with HR, and I was pretty vocal about, the money kind of sucks. I mean, if the money was better, I wouldn't hate the job as much as I did. And one of the anchors pulled me aside and was like, why are you leaving? What's going on? What happened? And I told her, like, the money's not good, and I miss my family. And she was like, well, money shouldn't be everything. Money's not everything. And I was like, you're right. But when it's a job you don't like and you're not seeing many benefits out of, money is everything. I don't work because I want to work. I work because I need to work, because that's the society we have. If I didn't have to have a job, there's no way in hell I'd have a job. But and she was like, she hated that answer. So it was but I, again, couldn't care. I couldn't care that people were talking crap about me behind my back, that they thought I was, I heard some stuff from coworkers I was still friends with that other coworkers had said, and I couldn't care. Was never going to see those people again. So I just, again, nothing could bring me down. Nothing could take that out. And the very last day, got through with my show. I hung out for a little bit in the newsroom waiting for the shows to wrap so I could talk to a couple of the other people that were still around. And I left. I went back to my apartment for a little bit, then went over to a coworker's apartment, and we had probably some COVID restrictions that were not followed. Maybe. We had some alcohol. We partied a little bit. And then the very next day, my parents showed up with the trailer. We loaded the trailer. And the next day after that, I was back in Michigan. We did not mess around with leaving. It was very much a get in, get out. And like I said, I do miss some of the people I worked with. Some of the producers, I'm not going to try to name them because, number one, don't want to get them in any trouble they might get in because of dumb bullshit politics that come with working in newsrooms. I do miss a couple of the anchors. I miss our sports reporters. I miss our a couple of our managers. But there are a lot of people that I'm glad I never have to deal with again. Specifically, another director I worked with, one of the managers that thought she was great and was the laziest person in the world I've ever met. Yeah. I moved home. Within 3 months of moving home, I lost about 50 pounds. I was down even lower weight than what I had been before I moved to Florida. I wasn't stressed out. It was a weird adjustment, not feeling stressed every day. And it was great. So, but I hadn't committed to not working in news at that point. I was still like, you know what? It's still the best path to do what I want to do, to get to where I want to get. So I applied for some jobs at news stations around West Michigan, and I applied for a couple outside of the state again too. But still we're around family-ish, and they're talking, like, every one of them like talked about how great my experience was, and it was going to be because I was applying for a lot of like photog jobs, assistant producers, directors, still even directors again. And everyone was, your experience is going to be valuable as a photog, knowing that you had been a director and you have all this years as photog work for the PBS station. You know what you're doing. It's going to be great. We don't really have to train you too much. And then they offered me the same money they offer someone who's coming fresh out of college. So that's when it hit me that you're never going to make money working in news. I even got a job offer where I was only going to get paid like $11.50 an hour. And I stopped the interview right after he told me that and was like, thank you for your time, but I'm no longer interested in the position. And he goes, we hear that a lot. That's not a surprise to us that you're no longer interested. And I was like, I can't. $11.50 an hour is no. That's I didn't say it, but it's insulting. To have the college education and spend all the time and money trying to get to this job and to get the money you get. Especially for being the environment it's insulting. It's very much insulting. So I just kind of realized, if I'm going to work a job that I'm not going to be all gung-ho about, that I'm not going to love. So I got a job that I don't necessarily love, but I make more money, and it's going to help me do what I want to do. I started my own company. I have an LLC, QH Productions. Do you need family photos, wedding videography? You got an idea for a story? Definitely hit me up. I'll definitely do that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I want to do. I want to freelance. You make a ton of money freelancing, and it's a lot of fun. You can have a lot of fun and make a lot of money. Great. But if you're not having fun and you're not making any money, not great. Don't stay at a job because you feel like you have to. I mean, sometimes you have to, but you also got to try to balance it. If it's a job you don't like, make sure you're getting something out of it that makes it worth it. And I know a lot of people were like, you getting great experience, and that's what they tried to keep selling me down in Florida, was the experience is great. And I'm like, yeah, but as I'm taking on more responsibilities to get this experience, I should be making money that lines up with it. If I'm now helping out with editing and I'm helping with creative services, I should be getting a bump in pay. You cannot add on more responsibilities and just expect me to accept them and not want something back from it. Call me selfish as much as you want. That's not how this is going to work. You need to be paid for the job you do, not for the job. You need to get paid for the job that you're doing, not for the one that they gave you. If you end up doing more and you're accepting more responsibilities, there needs to be you need to get a fair return. If you're getting paid as the same as somebody who's not doing that, why would I want to do that? How could you not expect me to complain? That's what really made me not want to work in that station anymore. In general, kind of really soured my opinion on news. I have a lot of friends who love working in news. I don't think worse of them because they love it. It's something they love. It's what I'm trying to find and get paid for. If they're already in it and they love it and they don't mind not making the money, then more on them. That's great. I am not like that. I'm not built for local news, and that's what it comes down to. I was not built to work in that environment. I'm not accepting of the way it was, and I don't think less of people who are fine with that. If they enjoy it, great. I mean, people probably look at what I do now and go, why? I would hate that. That's awful. Why are you doing that? And it's because I don't mind it. Because the financial compensation is matching. It's at least equal to, the more I love a job, the less I'm willing to get paid for it. The more I don't like a job, the more I want to get paid for it. So the compensation equals. I kind of got heated in this last little bit of the podcast. Wow, that was a little new for me. But I do want to eventually, I do have plans to talk to some people that I worked with to show kind of the better side of news. I don't want everything to, everyone to be like, oh, news sucks, news is awful. There's some really fun stories I have that I really want to have other people on the podcast to talk about. We talked about a little bit with Kylie on the episode she was on, and Nathan, but I want to get multiple people on at the same time so we can hear all sides of the story for some stories, because there's some great ones. So there are some fun parts of news. Like, don't think news is some bad job to have. It can be fun if it's what you enjoy. It wasn't what I enjoyed, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at the whole time. I'm just rambling at this point, so I'm gonna wrap it here. Thanks for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, comments, all that fun junk. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, hit me up with that 5-star review. I'd greatly appreciate it. Follow the podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, I think almost anywhere where you listen to podcasts at this point. Please check it out there. I do want to do more stuff, more podcasts and stuff. We're going to get some sports stuff coming soon because I'm suddenly reinvigorated into my love of sports, and there's fun stuff going on in Detroit. As much as our teams are sucking right now, there's stuff to talk about that's potentially fun. So we're going to do that coming up. It's not going to be a bunch of I know it's probably weird to mix in sports and news and blah blah blah, all that together in my stories, but I'm going to do it anyways. I don't care. It's my podcast. If you don't like it, listen to the ones you want to listen to. If you want to listen to just sports, listen to just sports. If you want to listen to just news stories, listen to those episodes. But I mean, you really should listen to them all because you love me. Anyways, I've been Jacob from Quad Hunting. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I will see you guys all next time. Do you wait? It's one more.